I was on a mission to find out what the heck happened to me.
This is Ryan, a man who, once upon a time, was a reckless adolescent that loved to party. That was all fun and games until he got a little too high one night, and by little, I mean a lot, and started to develop schizophrenia. When the doctors gave up on him, he decided to find a remedy himself, but I warn you, it wasn't what you would expect.
I don't know if it was a day or 2 days. I was in my bedroom of my apartment. At that point, a couple of friends said, come out to the living room, try to hang out, try to relax. And so I did. And I'm sitting on the couch, and there's probably 5 or 6 people in this little living room. I had extreme anxiety. I didn't know what was going on. I was so scared, so confused. And I had this experience where I looked at one of my friends, and like he was inside my head, completely 100%, like there was no escaping. He was in my thoughts, and it was so freaky, and it was absolutely terrifying. And then I had this entity of some sort telling me that I was supposed to kill myself, and I didn't want to kill myself. I don't want to die. But this thing was like telling me, that's what you're supposed to do. That's like your job. Like, that's what you're supposed to do now. Like, that's what's next for you. I'm like arguing with this thing in my head. Like, really? And it was telling me, yeah, go out and jump in front of a car. And I almost got up and ran outside and jumped in front of a car because this thing was telling me that's what I'm supposed to do. And it was terrifying. But right before I did that, I stood up and I said, somebody call my mom. That's the only thing I could think of. Somebody call my mom. Like, that's the only person on the planet that can help me. Call my mom. And then she showed up with an ambulance behind her, and they took me to the hospital.
So the first time where you had the near-death experience, there's no doubt that there was drugs in your system. There was a lot of drugs in your system. But what you just explained, you said it was 2 days after it. Is that correct?
Yeah, and reality is kicking back in.
Right, but what I want to ask, because I think it's important, is that at that point the drugs were not in your system anymore. This was not you hallucinating off of whatever you had taken.
Yeah, this is me back in reality. Like, drugs are worn off.
Yeah. So a lot of people would argue the first time was a hallucination, but the second time there was no drugs. And so what that makes me think of is schizophrenia. That's actually something that comes quite frequently on the channel, which is interesting. But it sounds like some sort of schizophrenia that's set in after you'd taken the drugs. And then all of a sudden, there's these voices in your head that you start hearing, and you lose touch with reality. That's how I would describe to someone what schizophrenia feels like, onset of schizophrenia. A lot of people, when they hear that, they just think that schizophrenia is not real and it's all in your head. Haven't experienced it, can you explain what it feels like to have these voices? Are they coming from your head, or is it something else that's giving you these thoughts?
Well, it's very hard to explain. I believe it's 100% demonic. Now, the familiar spirits side of things, that's when somebody that's in the room with you, a friend or whatever, they are taken over and they are used, and then something is speaking to you through them, and they're 100% like in your head, and they can speak to you, read your thoughts, and you can't escape. Like, they're with you, like in your head. It's the best I can explain it.
Yeah. And it came with suicidal thoughts, which is very common. But I want to make the argument that this was not you making it up. And the biggest part, I think, is what happened after, because you talked about your mom called an ambulance. You went to the hospital. What happened in the hospital? What did the doctors say? And can you run me through everything that happened as much as you can remember at the hospital?
So I was sitting in the hospital. I don't know if it was a day, 2 days, 3 days. I remember sitting there just staring at the wall, like not saying a word. My mom and my dad, they tried to talk to me, and I just take a deep breath like that. Like, I don't know what happened to me. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I am not okay. I don't know if I'm alive or dead. I just had the most traumatic thing happen to me, and I'm lost. I don't know. I don't know what to do. My dad would say, "Don't you want to get up? Go back to school, get a job. Get back to your life, your apartment." And just stared at the wall, just dead. And the doctors, I think they thought I fried my brain, like I was going to be a vegetable the rest of my life.
So the doctors had no remedy. They saw you and they saw you as kind of a lost cause that they couldn't do anything to help.
Yeah.
So what happened for you to actually get out of that?
I remember my mom, she ended up bringing her pastor from her church down to visit me. And he just prayed for me. And I suddenly started feeling better.
Instantly.
Yeah. Something about just praying just filled me with some kind of hope and energy. And I want to get out of here and get back to life.
So this is the part where I think this is the key part that is to be understood about your story. The drugs started it, and all of a sudden you got this feeling of darkness, you got anxiety, and then when you came out, you were anxious, you were confused, you didn't want to do anything, depressed, suicidal. And the moment someone came in the room and prayed for you, all of that went away. So you could say that this is just something that you made up in your head, but the facts of what happened point directly to evil and to God, and not to something that was invented by your brain.
Yeah.
So what happened after that point? You're obviously probably still confused. Can you explain to me how you recovered from that?
I remember I went to my parents' house, and I knew that the only thing that made me feel better was learning and understanding what had happened to me and figuring out, like, that's what I needed to do. I was on a mission to find out what the heck happened to me. What was that thing that was wrapping itself around me, trying to, take me down, and almost died. And the only answers is in the Bible, and reading books, from Christian authors about these types of things, just everything, all of it, heaven, hell, truth. I had to know it all. I laid at my parents' house on the couch for probably 2 weeks straight, just reading books after books after books. I would tell my mom, "Go give me this book, go give me that book," and just reading and learning, because everything I was learning, I was like, "Oh, well, that's what happened to me," and it is real. Heaven, hell, it's all real. And demonic activity, just learning all about the truths of this world.
So when you started reading these books, you were finally able to understand what happened in a way that made everything make sense. So you were very confused when all of that was happening. You had no idea what was real, what wasn't. And by reading the Bible, by reading books from Christian authors about demonology and that sort of stuff, you finally saw essentially what they were describing was exactly what you had experienced, correct?
Yeah, all I can say is I got a lot of answers, and it was the only thing that made me feel better. So, that's it. That's the only thing that would make me feel better, is learning about God and heaven, the truth, all of the truths of this world, the Christianity, all of it. It's the only thing that made me feel better. That's all I can say.